Bonjour, chooms. How y'all living? Hope everything is Nova and you're all having a preem week. So, once again, my video projects have been interrupted because there is breaking news out of France, the nation of love, and Expedition 33, which is one of the best RPGs I have ever played. I actually thought we could put to rest our fears that finasteride might be banned in Europe and move on to other important subjects, and that's because the European Medicines Agency that was investigating both finasteride and dutasteride rightly decided that, quote, the benefits of finasteride and dutasteride medicines continue to outweigh their risks for all approved uses, unquote. That was, of course, good news, chums, because the European Union, like the UK and the United States, looked at the data and decided not to ban finasteride or dutasteride. Increased physician and patient education was recommended, and it was recommended that the drugs be used cautiously in people with a history of mental health conditions. And that's not something even I disagree with, because it's people with mental health conditions who are much more likely to give themselves a nocebo effect and develop imaginary conditions like post-finasteride syndrome. However, this outcome was clearly a victory for hair loss sufferers and a grand defeat for organizations like the PFS Network and PFS Foundation, who want to deprive the entire world of this glorious life-saving medication. However, looks like France may stubbornly be resisting the recommendations of the European Union, and there might be another French Revolution about to happen here, chooms. As you can see from this headline, the PFS Foundation is overjoyed to see this resistance from France. Of course, I don't trust the interpretation of the PFS Foundation, nor should anyone else, so I went directly to the website in France. It's the webpage of the ANSM, which is the French equivalent of the FDA, and they work closely with the European Medicines Agency, aka the EMA, and the European Commission. So thanks to our team of translation experts located at the Haircafe Institute of Scientific Research, I was able to decode what's going on in France apropos finasteride and dutasteride. So first, the article summarizes what the EMA investigation found. This paragraph here notes that people who get sexual side effects from finasteride could get alterations of mood like depression or even suicidal thoughts due to these side effects. So the EU recommended that warnings be added to the finasteride box, saying that patients who experience sexual side effects or have psychiatric problems should seek the advice of a physician. These next three paragraphs say first that no warnings need to be added to the product information for topical finasteride. The EMA did recommend adding similar warnings to the finasteride warnings to the dutasteride package, even though no link to mood disorders were found with dutasteride. Finally, a letter was sent out to all European physicians informing them of these changes. However, the ANSM decided that these measures weren't sufficient for France. They reasoned that France already includes warnings on their product information, so the new recommendations are already being done in France. Also, they raised concerns about persistent symptoms after stopping treatment, which is something that the PFS Foundation is of course lobbying these agencies about in an attempt to get these drugs banned completely. So there's no doubt that the French ANSM agency has been strongly lobbied by the PFS Foundation, as was the EMA. So the plan is for the ANSM to review the situation and then make recommendations to the European Commission, which is a level above the EMA. So that's all the French article says, but the article from the PFS Foundation adds, quote, while there's no official word yet as to the ANSM's next move, a source close to the finasteride safety negotiations with the EMA says, don't be surprised if the agency suspends or withdraws marketing authorization for the drug before year end, unquote. So that's clearly the goal here from these fascist assholes. They want to get finasteride and dutasteride off the market in Europe completely. They want to take away your finasteride just because they're too afraid to use the drug themselves. So they're not going to be happy until everybody on planet Earth is just as bald, sexless, and miserable as they are. And don't think for a second that they're going to stop with just France here, chums. The article also encourages all users of finasteride who have side effects, whether they're from the US or outside of the US, to call the FDA and let them know. Clearly, they want to flood the FDA with all these frivolous complaints because they won't stop with just the EU, chums. Even if the EU does end up banning finasteride and dutasteride, they definitely won't stop there. Their ultimate goal is clearly to get a ban in the United States and then the entire world. And given the anti-science bias in the Health and Human Services Agency in the United States right now, anything can definitely happen, including a total finasteride and total dutasteride ban in the United States. So we're not out of the woods yet, chums. Hopefully the EU will not succumb to pressure from France and follow the recommendations of the EMA, but time will ultimately tell. The only way to fight back against this is to deprive anti-finasteride organizations of any victory, even marginal ones. They have finite resources, so it makes you really wonder, why would they be spending their limited money on legal fees trying to ban the drug? Why not try to fund scientific research to actually prove that post-finasteride syndrome is real instead of spending all this money on lawyers and lobbying? All they would have to do do is fund a placebo-controlled, double-blinded study where the incidence of side effects was compared between finasteride and placebo in order to see if persistent side effects really do occur with finasteride. So, if they're so confident that persistent side effects are actually real, why not fund the research to prove it once and for all and shut up people like me? I'll tell you the reason why. It's because they're not confident in their beliefs. They know that if they did that, then they'd be disproving post-finasteride syndrome and that their organization would subsequently cease to exist. This isn't about science to them, chums. This is about getting rich off of lawsuits, and it's about spreading their own misery to as many people as possible, because the truth is, they resent the vast majority of people who have had a good experience with finasteride because they wish they could be like us. And since they can't, the only way for them to cope is to drag them down to their own level, because misery loves company. Thank you for watching, chums. I'll see you all next time. God bless.